Hi there, and welcome back to another episode at Station Road. Now, in today's episode, I continue my adventures into Hornby's HM7000 Bluetooth Decoder system. So, following on from a series of videos I did a few weeks back, dabbling into the HM7000 Hornby decoder system, and some new decoders have now arrived, and I purchased another 8-pin decoder and also a 21-pin decoder. Now, the plan in today's video was to actually cover 2 locomotives and the installation of these decoders. Now, half expecting I may run into some complications with these decoders, I did with one of them. So rather than trying to cram all of this into a single video, I'm actually splitting these up into 2 separate videos. So today's episode covers the more successful of these 2 decoder installations, and this one is for the Heljan DP2. So the other installation is for a Hornby class 9F with an 8-pin socket, and I encountered quite a few more issues and problems. Interesting that it was a Hornby decoder going into a Hornby locomotive, and it was the one that actually seemed to be more of an issue. So I think without further ado, we'll get into the Heljan DP2 installation and see how it goes. So we'll start with the 21-pin decoder, and that is going into this locomotive here, which of course is the Heljan DP2. Now, unlike the previous installation in the Bachmann 37 that I did possibly several weeks ago, I did actually have the 8-pin decoder plugged in the wrong way around, which I believe could have been one of the reasons I had that funny glitch with the DCC address being entered and it reading differently on my DCC JMRI system. So of course with the 21-pin decoder, there's no chance of getting it around the wrong way because there is a vacant pin at one end. So in terms of the items that come in, of course, in this pack, there is of course the decoder, which we've got here, the 21-pin decoder, and then of course the speaker and speaker baffles. So in terms of the baffle I've actually used the largest version, but I have modified it. So in order for it to fit quite nicely in behind the bulkhead, I did chop roughly about 5mm off one end, and then of course just super glued a piece of styrene over the end. Now, in terms of these baffles, the understanding is that they need to be airtight. So I made sure that the styrene component at the end here was well and truly glued and secured into place. So we've got our speaker, of course, which is self-adhesive, mounted in its slot in here, and then what I've actually done is just wrapped a bit of black insulation tape over the top just to hide the silver finish on the actual speaker itself, because as of course this will sit in here, it is roughly directly below where the fan is on the roof, so I didn't really want that silvery shiny finish on the back of the speaker showing through. I've also wrapped a little bit around this white plastic here as well, just to hide that. So the DP2 is quite an interesting locomotive in a lot of ways. One might think that it's associated with the DP1 and of course also the Deltics, and from an outward appearance, of course, the DP2 looks remarkably like a Class 55 Deltic, and I think it pretty much shares the same outward structure in terms of its body, but of course on the inside the DP2s were a single prime mover, whereas the Deltics and the DP1 were dual prime movers. I think the Napier Deltic motors that were used in them, whereas the DP2 had a single prime mover, and from my understanding the DP2 was basically the precursor to the Class 50 as opposed to the Class 55. So fortunately in the Hornby sound library there is a Class 50 there, so I naturally sort of assumed that probably the best match for this DP2 will of course be the Class 50. So we'll set this up, I'll install our decoder, and I'm also actually going to use the power bank that I'd previously bought, and this I think will work well in this particular locomotive because the Heljan locomotives, I think it's something really to do with the wheels that are used there. They get dirty quite quickly, the Heljan wheels, and so I think actually a power pack in this one might be really useful. And of course we've got a area down at the other end ideally suited to fit the power pack down there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just simply going to install the decoder first and get that all set up before I attach the power pack, because during the setup processes, if you watched the previous video, you have to power cycle the locomotive, and if the power pack's actually installed you have to wait longer, up to 60 seconds, whereas without the power pack you really power cycle it for 5 to 10 seconds. So as I said, we'll just go ahead and install this decoder. I'll take out this current decoder in here, which is a DCC Concept Zen black decoder. We'll take that out and put this decoder in and get the app up and running and take it from there. So I've installed the decoder and also the speaker, but I've left the power bank off at this stage because it's just going to be easier in terms of the setup process. So as per the previous video that I did on the subject, I'm going to use my DC controller to provide the power to the track and obviously to the locomotive, and it's just maxed out, and we'll switch it on and then set up linking this device. So the power is now on, and we'll click to scan, and straight away a device here has come up. We're just waiting for it to finish, and it's stopped scanning, so we can select this device. So there's 2 updates required, which was what happened in the previous setup that I did. So we'll go ahead and just start these updates. So I think the firmware app-ROM update takes a few minutes for that to update. One of these takes longer than the other. I can't remember which one, but we'll speed through this footage. Right, so the 2 updates have completed, and it's a case of clicking done. And at this point here, this is where we have to power cycle. Now if the power bank is installed, it says you have to wait at least 60 seconds before returning the locomotive to the track. Without that, it can be 5 seconds. So in this situation I've got a switch on my DC controller, and I just simply switch that off. It saves having to lift the locomotive off the track and then have to place the locomotive back on, get all the wheels on the rails. So I've just switched it off at the controller. So we have no image at the moment. I'm not worried about that. Now, one of the things that I seemed to encounter last time as an issue, of course, is at this point I'm not going to readdress this locomotive. I'm just going to keep it at number 3 for now and do the actual profile upload. So that's the sound profiles for this locomotive, and then change the address afterwards, because there just seemed to be something kind of odd going on. But then, as I mentioned, it could be related to the fact that the previous installation was an 8-pin decoder and I did have it plugged in the wrong way around, so that could have been the issue. But nonetheless, I'm just going to use the same process that I used last time. So we go down to Browse Profiles and click on that, and we're going into the diesels now. This is one of the kind of unusual design flaws in this app, is, and I think it's based on my screen now, this is an iPhone 14 and it just looks like there's nothing else. It's just the screen width. I think if I was using a tablet you'd see more, but you have to scroll across. And what we're looking for, and I did check, there is a class 50, so here's our class 50. So if we select that and we go install locomotive profile, so this particular update here is the SPIR ROM, and it takes the longest. So at the moment it's estimated around about 11 minutes roughly. So we'll just speed through this and get to the end once it's done the update. Right, so that's got the profile installed for the sound, and now of course it's asking once again to power cycle, so I'm just going to switch it off at the transformer. So it's now confirmed that the sound pack has been installed. So next we've got the running profile and the function map, so we'll click and install these. It's writing all the CVs, and once again another power cycle, and we'll import the function map, and that's all successfully imported. So if we now go to our control tab, and of course that's the previous locomotive I did, and now we have new locomotive. Now obviously I haven't given it a name, it's still got address number 3, but let's just see what this sounds like. So I think first I might just go to the locomotive settings and make sure we're on Bluetooth at the moment, and we'll change the name and the address later on. So that's all in order, and it's saying it's active and on Bluetooth. So if we just slide this up, and we have some movement, so that's a good sign. Let's see what the sound is like. So it sounds pretty good, and I think even with the modified speaker baffle, it's certainly got a reasonably nice sort of throaty feel about it, so I'm quite happy with that. I'll of course go through, rename this locomotive, give it the new address, but we'll sort of look at that, do that all off camera. Right, so I've now readdressed the locomotive and given it a name, and interestingly came up with the same issue where the address that I entered in the settings for here, and I put in 250, so 2 for the DP2 and 50 for the Class 50 sound, because there's no running number as such for this particular locomotive. And then of course when I take it over to the JMRI DCC, once I've of course switched it over to the DCC mode, the address is not picked up, and it still reads the address as number 3 being the default address. So that of course occurred the last time with the previous locomotive I did. Now what I've actually discovered, and I don't know whether it's intended this way or not, but what I've found is if you enter the address and the loco name that you'd like to have, and then once you've done that, actually close the HM7000 app, so don't minimize it but actually close it, and then reopen the app, and then when I took the locomotive over to the DCC system, lo and behold, the 250 address came up. So I'm not quite sure what the deal is. It seems that when you just simply enter the address here, it doesn't really actually read the address to the chip unless you actually close the app and reopen the app. So yeah, it's just a weird sort of quirk. So that's resolved that, and everything's actually working really well under the JMRI with DCC, and it also is working superbly well with the Bluetooth as well. So I just dialed down the volume on some of the horns, so we'll just go back to the Bluetooth for now, and the horn seemed a bit loud. So of course in your CV settings, so we go up to here and click on this tab here, which advanced CV editor, and your volume controls are all in here, and F2 and F3 of the horn, I'll drop them right back to a value of 20. And of course you can edit all of these individual volumes in here just by sourcing the function for what particular sound there is. So yeah, that seems to be working okay, and the address certainly hasn't got scrambled. It's just a case of closing the app and reopening the app, and then my DCC system, the Arduino system, which of course is just for my test track, manages to pick up the correct address and it's not scrambled. So that kind of means, really, I think the previous issue I had where the address was just actually completely different was due to the chip being plugged in the wrong way around. So there we have it for the DP2, and it did actually go reasonably well. There were still some weird anomalies with the DCC address and the JMRI reading that address, and as I mentioned, I found a solution by closing the app down and reopening it, and for some reason that seemed to correct the issue, and when I read the decoder again under JMRI, the address was correct. So the next video is going to cover Hornby's Class 9F locomotive, and this locomotive is the Evening Star, and there was a number of issues that I came across during the installation of the decoder into this locomotive, and in the end, as I mentioned at the beginning, the video was just getting drawn out, so that is of course going to be an entirely independent video So I guess a little bit of a brief rundown of what happened in the 9F. Once again, I had the DCC address issue. I also had an issue with the supplied speaker that came with the 8-pin pack, and yeah, just a number of other things that just really kind of got me head scratching quite a bit. So I'll leave it there for today's episode. I certainly hope you've found the content in this video useful, and particularly for those who are maybe sort of deciding whether they want to delve into Hornby's HM7000 Bluetooth system. So do take care, everyone. Look after yourselves. Of course, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will catch you next time. Bye for now.